My husband accidentally aired his affair on our smart TV. A video of her in the bikini I bought played on our living room screen from the work trip he lied about last week. He smirked, called me overly sensitive, and said to be a better wife instead of spying. Then he turned off the TV and walked away, so I made my own video and sent it to his entire office during his Zoom presentation. It started with a click. A soft, mechanical sound from the TV remote that didn't even belong to me. I was folding laundry on the couch, minding my own business, when the screen flickered on by itself. We have one of those smart TVs that syncs to phones and devices. I thought maybe it was an update, then the video started playing. At first, I thought it was some random beach clip. Blue water, wind, laughter. But then I recognized the voice. His voice. My husband's voice. And then the camera tilted, and there she was. A woman in the bright red bikini I bought for our anniversary trip 2 years ago. She was sitting on his lap, holding his face, kissing him while he laughed. It took my brain a few seconds to catch up. My hands were shaking so bad that I almost dropped the laundry basket. I felt my stomach twist like someone had punched me. It wasn't just that it was him, it was how casual it looked. Like he'd done this before, like she belonged there. He walked into the room right then, holding his coffee mug, and froze when he saw what was on the screen. We just stared at each other, that awful silence between us thick enough to choke on. Then he smirked. Actually smirked. "You shouldn't go through my stuff," he said. "That's private." "Private," I snapped. "You're cheating on me and it's showing on our TV." He rolled his eyes like I was some overdramatic child. "You're always so sensitive. Maybe if you were a better wife, I wouldn't need to find someone who actually listens to me." That line, it broke something in me. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stared at him and realized I was done being the fool in this house. He turned off the TV, walked away like it was nothing, and went upstairs to take a shower. I sat there in silence, hearing the water run, feeling something inside me harden into glass. I looked at the dark TV screen and saw my reflection, pale, humiliated, shaking, but my eyes looked different. Cold. And that's when I started thinking about how I'd make him feel what I just felt. Not with words. Not with tears. With something he couldn't dismiss or twist against me. Something that would hit him exactly where it hurt most. He worked remotely for a big marketing firm, full of those self-satisfied guys who think they're gods behind a webcam. He was supposed to lead a major Zoom presentation later that week, one that could get him promoted. I remembered that because he wouldn't stop bragging about it, so I made a plan. And when the day came, he wasn't the only one who had something to show on screen. We'd been together for 9 years, married for 6. He used to be this sweet, funny guy from Denver who made me laugh until I cried. When we first met, I thought he was the one. He said all the right things, how I made him feel seen, how he'd never met anyone so real. I believed every word, but somewhere around year 4 he changed. Or maybe I just started seeing who he really was. It started small. He'd get distant, glued to his phone, always too tired for date nights. He'd start calling me needy or too emotional whenever I tried to talk about how alone I felt. When I asked why he'd suddenly started working late so often, he said, "That's what it takes to be successful, babe. You wouldn't understand." I used to make excuses for him. Told my friends he was just stressed, that work was hard. But deep down, I knew. The signs were there. The extra cologne. The new shirts I hadn't seen before. The way he'd suddenly silence his phone when I entered the room. Then there were the work trips. He'd go to San Diego, Phoenix, Austin, always a few days at a time, always conveniently when I had shifts at the hospital. He'd bring back cheap souvenirs like shot glasses and keychains, as if that erased the smell of hotel soap on his clothes. I confronted him once, about 6 months before everything blew up. I told him I felt like he was hiding something. He gave me that same smug look and said, "If you can't trust me, maybe you're the problem." That line kept echoing in my head every night he was gone. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I wasn't fun anymore. Maybe I'd gotten boring. So I started trying harder, new recipes, new clothes, even couples counseling. He skipped half the sessions. The therapist said, "He seems disengaged." I wanted to laugh. Disengaged didn't even begin to cover it. Then last week, he went on that work trip to Miami. He left on a Wednesday, came back Sunday night. He kissed me like nothing happened, told me he was exhausted. I washed his clothes the next day and found a receipt from a beachside bar, with 2 drinks on it and a note written in lipstick. Same time next month. I didn't say a word. I just tucked it into my pocket and waited. So when that video accidentally played on our TV, it wasn't really a surprise. It was just confirmation. Proof that my instincts had been right all along. And when he called me overly sensitive, something snapped for good. Because I realized he wasn't even sorry. He enjoyed making me feel small. That night, I barely slept. I started going through our devices, seeing what synced where. Our TV, his phone, his work laptop, everything connected to the same cloud. I knew that if I wanted to destroy him, it wouldn't take much. Just a little creativity and a deep understanding of how much he cared about his image. He'd cheated on me for years, lied to my face, humiliated me in my own house, and thought he could walk away untouched. After the TV, nothing about our house felt normal. I started noticing details I'd let slide for years. The way he left his laptop open on the kitchen island. The careless way he'd plug his phone into our shared charger and forget about it. He was sloppy because he thought he could be. He thought I wouldn't look. He thought I'd keep being the patient wife who forgave, who smoothed over the cracks until they disappeared. I stopped being patient. For 2 days, I followed tiny, quiet routines. I pretended like everything was fine at breakfast. I asked about meetings I already knew about. I laughed at the same dumb joke he'd told 1,000 times. He ate it up. The smugness came back in a wave. He started calling me dramatic over text, flirting with the mistress in messages right under my nose. He was so used to being able to wipe his hands clean that he didn't bother to hide his fingerprints anymore. But I wasn't taking the cheap shot everyone thought revenge meant. I didn't splash his car with paint. I didn't post his secrets on a random forum. I collected. I watched him from the small safety of knowledge, what hotels he favored, the cadence of his lies, the way he hyped the promotion and bragged about his team. He loved being admired at work more than he loved me. That was the weakness I kept circling. At the same time, I had to keep a face for the outside world. My job at the hospital demanded it. People there thought I was calm, composed, competent. They had no idea my nights were being eaten raw by plans and lists, and the kind of slow, methodical anger I'd never known I had. The hospital lights and the sterile scent of disinfectant were a perfect cover. In the fluorescent glow, I became someone else. Someone who could hold a child's hand and steady a panicked mother, while another part of me drafted rupturing truths in the back of my head. He started spending more time working from home the week before his big presentation. He was rehearsing lines, practicing inflection, telling me which colleagues would be there, names he said were important. He repeated the name of the client who'd supposedly put him in line for the promotion like it was a talisman. I made note of everything and then I sat on it. I knew I had to time things so the fallout would land where it hurt the most. I admit, there were nights I almost quit. There were mornings I sat on the bathroom floor feeling like the worst person in the world. Maybe I was. Maybe revenge would make me monstrous. But every time I pictured him turning off that TV like it was nothing, every time I heard him tell me to be a better wife, the old self, who'd swallowed every apology and move on, curled up and died a little more. In its place grew a cold, wired thing that wanted him to feel exposed. I started building the thing in secret. Little video clips, snippets from his old phone backups, moments he believed were private, laughter with her, a slow kiss, an off-handed moment of tenderness that stung the most because he'd never given me that. I dragged my own humiliation into it too, recorded my voice over a single slide that asked one simple question. How many times did he lie? I wasn't reckless. I didn't post anything public. I balanced the edges of what I could do with what I had to keep buried. Kids didn't exist in my life, thankfully, and no one in our neighborhood would be willing to embroil themselves in this. My revenge had to be surgical and unavoidable. I told myself that a public unmasking in front of his coworkers, people who already admired him, would be the only place he couldn't spin it, the only place his smiling mask would matter less than the truth. By the day of his presentation, the house felt like a room before an explosion, still, charged, and waiting. He left his laptop on the dining table, charger jammed in, headset nearby. He kissed me like he always did, sloppy and familiar, and said, "Don't mess anything up while I'm gone." Big day. Then he walked down the hall and closed the door. I stood in the doorway and watched his back. My hands were steady now. A clarity had settled over me that was almost terrifying. I was past hurt. I was at the point where I could finish what I'd started. And then, like a door slamming in the dark, something happened that I did not see coming. Something that would change everything I thought I knew about him. It happened while I was finalizing the timing for the video, right down to the second it would hijack his screen during his Zoom presentation. I was in the bedroom, headphones in, testing the file one last time. His laptop was in the dining room, connected to his company account, and I had just made sure the autoplay feature was working when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. You don't know me, but I thought you should. Attached was a single photo. Him, my husband, sitting on a hotel bed with the same woman from the beach video and another woman. But it wasn't that part that stopped me cold. It was what was sitting next to them on the bed. A tiny stuffed giraffe. The exact one I'd bought for his niece last Christmas. At first, I didn't understand. Then another message came through. Unknown. He said this was for our daughter. Thought you'd want to know. My heart dropped. I dialed the number immediately. A woman answered, shaky voice, maybe late 20s, definitely younger than me. She told me she'd been seeing him for almost 2 years. She thought he was divorced. He told her he had full custody of his daughter. My stomach twisted. He doesn't have a daughter, I said. There was this long, awful pause. Then she said, he told me she was yours, that you were an addict. That the court gave him custody because you couldn't handle being a mom. I couldn't even speak. I had no air left in me. He had built an entire fake story, used me as his villain to charm another woman. A whole life that didn't exist. And apparently there were others. She said she found messages from women in other cities, that he was using different names sometimes. I hung up before she could finish. I just sat there, shaking. My hands were ice. My mind raced through every memory, every work trip, every late night. This wasn't just cheating anymore. This was a pattern, a web. When he came out of his office for lunch, I watched him walk into the kitchen like nothing had happened, humming to himself, scrolling his phone. I looked at him, this man who had rewritten reality for sport, and realized that the person I married didn't even exist. He saw me staring and frowned. What? I forced a smile. Nothing. Just thinking about dinner. Inside, I was thinking about that woman's message, about the stuffed giraffe, about how his lies stretched beyond me, beyond her, maybe beyond what I could ever prove. He wasn't just cruel, he was calculated. And suddenly, my plan didn't feel like enough. Just exposing his affair wasn't justice anymore. He needed to see himself fall. He needed to lose everything he'd built on those lies. His job, his fake persona, his network of women who thought he was some victim. So I changed my plan. I opened his work email and searched through his sent folder. Dozens of messages popped up between him and his coworkers. Some flirty, some inappropriate, some that would definitely get him in trouble with HR. But then I found something worse. A string of confidential documents, client proposals he'd been forwarding to his personal Gmail account. He wasn't just cheating. He was stealing. And that's when the revenge went from emotional to professional. When I finally stopped shaking, the anger calmed into focus. That's the worst kind of clarity, the kind that makes you methodical and cold. I was a nurse in Denver, used to triage, prioritize, stabilize, act. I put those instincts to work on him. I told myself this wasn't about getting even for the thrill of it. It was about exposure. About making sure the people who worshipped him at work saw him for what he really was. About ensuring the woman he'd lied to, and the woman who texted me wouldn't be the only collateral damage. He'd weaponized my name before. I'd weaponize what he actually cared about, his reputation and his job. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and laid out everything I had like evidence on an autopsy tray. The beach video, the hotel photos, the lipstick receipt, the messages from the other woman, the stuffed giraffe picture that felt like a knife. And the thing that turned my blood cold, client proposals and confidential files he'd forwarded to his personal Gmail, drafts with company margins and proprietary strategies. He was playing with fire. I didn't need to invent anything. I just needed to assemble. The files were on his work laptop. He'd left it open more than once, password saved because he hated typing things. I told myself the truth out loud. I'd been living with proof under the same roof for months. There was nothing heroic about it. It was salvage. It felt necessary. I planned timing like a surgeon. He had that big Zoom presentation scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m., an audience of partners, clients, and the whole regional team. He'd been practicing that slide deck for weeks. A promotion hinge, his moment to bask. I thought about playing my video then, the red bikini footage he thought was private. But I realized power lived in the combination, emotional ruin plus professional annihilation. So I decided to strike both at once. I made 3 lists: what to send, who to send it to, and when. I wrote a concise, cold email to HR with the subject line, "Confidential, possible policy violations urgent." Attached. Screen grabs of his forwarded client files and timestamps showing the move to his personal account. HR couldn't ignore a leak of proprietary info. The corporate ladder collapses fast when legal risk appears. I wrote another email to his direct manager and a select list of execs that included the video clip and the beach photos with no commentary, just the truth in plain sight. If they cared about company image, they'd act quickly. If they didn't, at least his colleagues would see. Then I turned to the Zoom. I couldn't remotely hack the meeting. I'm not a hacker, and I refuse to be the kind of person who learns to break into systems. But I had something simpler. He left his laptop on the dining table with his profile logged in when he paced the house practicing slides. I sat down, opened his email, queued the video in a new message, and attached a single line. "You'll want to see this before you present." I scheduled the email to send at 10:03 a.m., the exact moment he always clicked share screen and basked in his own voice. I wasn't going to airdrop humiliation to strangers. I was going to make it unavoidable for him, right there with colleagues watching. There were risks. If I got caught, I could lose everything. There was a chance HR would trace the leak back to me. There was also a chance their legal team would bury everything and he'd walk away. But the thing is, I'd already lived with the quieter, more corrosive pain for years. Doing nothing felt worse than any gamble. I proofed the emails until my eyes blurred. I rehearsed my calm face in the reflection of the microwave. I told myself I could survive the fallout because I had the truth and I had the documentation. I told myself that this wasn't petty. It was the only leverage left when the man you trusted uses your name as his alibi. At 9:50 a.m., I printed a single copy of the video stills and slid it into a plain envelope addressed to his manager. I walked down the block to the little courier shop on the corner, hands steady, and dropped it in the outgoing tray. The clerk didn't ask questions. Nobody did. Denver was waking up. I walked home and sat in the dark living room and watched the clock. 3 minutes into his presentation, my scheduled email would hit inboxes. 2 minutes after that, HR would have something to worry about. And somewhere between the two, he would look at his screen and see himself, the way he'd really been, reflected and burning. What I didn't plan for, what I never could have expected, was how everything he had built around his lies would react. Because his lies had a backbone I hadn't seen yet. At 10:04 a.m., I was sitting on the couch with my coffee when I heard it, the faint sound of him talking through the wall. Confident, rehearsed, fake laugh on cue, then silence. A long, awful silence. Then a bang, his office door slamming. I knew the email had landed. I didn't need to see it to know. The sudden quiet was enough. I imagined him realizing what was playing. The coworkers watching. The red bikini. His stupid grin. My voice over the clip, calm and steady, saying, "This is who you're trusting with your clients." I thought that would be it. I thought I'd hear shouting, maybe the sound of him grabbing his keys and storming out. But instead, there was nothing. For almost an hour. When he finally came out, his face was gray. Not angry, scared. Like the bottom had dropped out beneath him. He didn't say a word. He just grabbed his jacket, his laptop, and walked out the door. For a few minutes, I actually felt relief. Then, around 1 p.m., I got an email from his company's HR department. At first, I panicked, thinking they'd somehow trace the leak to me. But when I opened it, the first line froze me. "Mrs., we're reaching out regarding a matter involving your husband and our legal department. We'd like to confirm a few details before proceeding." Legal department. The next line explained it. They'd received not one, but 3 different complaints that morning, 2 from female employees, 1 from an external contractor, alleging harassment and coercion by my husband. And apparently the video I'd sent prompted others to come forward. That's when it hit me. He hadn't just cheated with random women outside of work, he'd been sleeping with women in the office. subordinates, maybe even interns. And not consensually from the sound of it. I didn't know how to feel. Vindicated, horrified, both. The HR rep asked if I could verify his travel records, confirm dates for possible misconduct. They didn't mention the video directly, but the subtext was clear. They knew I'd started the avalanche. By that evening, it was everywhere in his professional circle. I got messages from numbers I didn't recognize, coworkers, probably thanking me for exposing the truth. But around 8 p.m., my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from the unknown number, the same woman who'd sent me that photo with the stuffed giraffe. He's calling everyone. He said if he goes down, he's taking you with him. Said he has insurance. My throat went dry. Insurance? I knew exactly what that meant. A year earlier, when things between us had been rocky, he'd made me sign my name on a few joint accounts, business-related, he said, to help him organize expenses. I hadn't thought twice. I trusted him, and if those accounts were tied to those stolen client files, he wasn't just planning to ruin me emotionally. He was planning to frame me for his mess. That's when I realized I hadn't been playing chess with a cheater. I'd been playing with a sociopath. He didn't care about the women, or the company, or me. He cared about control, about winning. And now that I'd broken his illusion, he was going to burn everything, including me, to keep from losing. I had to move fast. By the time I realized what he'd done, it was already in motion. His insurance wasn't just talk, it was a setup he'd been building quietly for months. I started digging through the files tied to those business accounts he'd opened for convenience. They were filled with transactions I didn't recognize: flights, hotel stays, client dinners, charges at upscale restaurants I'd never even heard of. And all of it under my name. He'd attached my work ID, my billing address, my signature. I checked the scanned forms, my handwriting was there, except it wasn't mine. He'd forged them. The bastard had been using me as his financial decoy while he was out sleeping around and stealing from his company. Every hotel, every business expense, every wire transfer to his personal PayPal, it all looked like I'd been helping him funnel stolen funds. It was a perfect setup. If he got caught, he could hand over my name, my accounts, and the digital trail that pointed to me. That's what the "better wife" comment meant. That's what all his condescension and gaslighting were really for. He wasn't just cheating, he was grooming me to take the fall. And it worked, at least on paper. He must have figured that one day the walls would close in, so he built himself an escape route lined with my forged signature. I went cold all over. Not the kind of cold you feel from fear, this was deeper. Like something in me just stopped moving. When I finally looked up, the house around me didn't even feel like home anymore. It felt like a trap, and I was the dumb animal that wandered in willingly. I called the woman from the texts, the one with the daughter. I needed more answers. When she picked up, I told her everything. The accounts, the HR email, the fake travel receipts. She got quiet. Then she said, "He told me his ex, meaning you, used to steal money from him. Said she ruined his credit and that's why he couldn't get a mortgage. He said you forged his name." My stomach turned. He'd been laying this narrative down everywhere he went. With his coworkers, his mistresses, even friends. Planting the seed that I was the liar, the thief, the manipulator. That's when I realized something else. This wasn't new behavior. I called his mother. She and I hadn't spoken much in months, but she picked up immediately when she heard my voice. And when I told her what was happening, she just sighed, like she'd been waiting for this call. She said he'd been like this since college. Always charming, always scheming. Got caught stealing a professor's research once, blamed it on a classmate. Dated 2 girls at once, told each one the other was stalking him. Even back then, he'd twist the truth until he believed it himself. He'd once told her he loved making people dance without touching them. That line hit me like a punch to the chest, because that's exactly what he'd done to me. He'd choreographed my whole marriage like a performance, making me feel crazy, overreactive, guilty, so that by the time I saw the truth, I couldn't even trust my own perception. He'd built every piece of our life together as a contingency plan. The loving husband act, the work trips, the business accounts, the emotional manipulation, all of it designed to keep me pliable and useful until the moment he needed a scapegoat. And now that I'd pulled the mask off, he was ready to use that story one last time. He didn't want me destroyed out of spite. He wanted me destroyed out of strategy, because if I went down first, he'd still win. That night, sitting alone in that dark living room, I realized this wasn't just revenge anymore. It was survival. And if he wanted war, I'd give him one. Once I understood what he'd done, the fear turned into something else: resolve. I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to disappear quietly while he rewrote the story again. I'd lived inside his fiction for years. This time I'd tell it myself, in documentation he couldn't erase. I started with proof. I pulled copies of everything he'd ever left on the shared drive. Bank statements, scanned receipts, his emails. I printed them, photographed them, backed them up on a flash drive. I compared signatures until I could show the tiny differences. His forgery slanted left where mine always curved right. I wrote it all out like a case file. Then I went to the police station. I told them I suspected forgery and identity theft. I brought the flash drive, the forged signatures, and the message history with the woman who said he'd called his fake daughter ours. They took it seriously. It wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about stolen money and falsified documents tied to an active corporate investigation. Next, I called his company's HR rep, the same one who'd emailed me. I told her I had evidence that the stolen client files and the suspicious financial transactions were part of a pattern, that I'd already spoken with law enforcement, and that my lawyer would contact their legal department to protect me as a victim, not an accomplice. She sounded stunned but grateful. She said their board had already suspended him pending investigation. I could hear typing in the background as she took notes. She promised to forward my statement to their counsel. He came home that night like a ghost. The confidence was gone. He didn't even try to yell. He looked at me the way a trapped animal looks at the cage closing. I could tell he knew I'd done something, but not what. He asked, "What did you do?" I told him the truth. I told them everything, and I backed it up. He laughed at first, that brittle laugh he used when he thought he still had control. "You don't have anything, you idiot. You were part of it." I opened the folder I'd left on the table, his forged forms, the copied emails, the police report receipt on top. His face drained of color. I could see the moment he realized he wasn't the only one who could build a narrative. He tried to threaten me again, said I'd regret this. I told him the DA's office would call him next week, and then I walked out. Within a week, the company filed a complaint with authorities for breach of confidentiality and fraud. HR told me off the record that several women had come forward with harassment claims. The story spread fast in their industry. His name started disappearing from company pages and LinkedIn. His promotion was revoked. Then his job. The police contacted me 2 weeks later to confirm that he'd been questioned about the forged accounts. They cleared me formally after reviewing my work records and the timestamped messages that showed he'd been out of state when those documents were signed. They said charges against him were pending. He moved out quietly. The woman with the fake daughter blocked his number and sent me one last message. "Thank you for exposing him." I didn't reply. I didn't want to stay linked to any of it. Months later, I sold the house. Every room had too much of his shadow in it. I rented a small apartment downtown, something with light and noise and no trace of that old quiet. Sometimes people ask how it feels, if revenge made me happy. It didn't. But it made me free. For the first time in years, I could wake up without trying to guess which version of him I'd be dealing with that day. He wanted me to disappear under the weight of his lies. Instead, I wrote every one of them down and handed them to people who could actually do something about it. And when the detective called to tell me he'd finally been indicted, I didn't celebrate. I just hung up, sat down, and whispered, "Checkmate." Because after everything he'd done, after the manipulation, the gaslighting, the humiliation, there was only one ending that ever made sense. He taught me how to survive his games. I just learned how to win them.